Hi everybody, welcome to Sunya IAS. Welcome to the mains article discussion. Today we are going to discuss oil pollution in a very comprehensive manner so that all the aspects related to mains will be covered. In oil pollution, we will be starting with a framework that I'll share with you. Now, oil pollution is not just important only from the environmental angle. It is important with the context of disaster management, and it is equally important at the governance level as well as energy security. Okay, because oil and the natural reserves of oil tends to be a very polluting source. So as and when the countries extract more oil, so one, it leads to more pollution. Second, we also have to think of long-term energy requirements. So the outline of this lecture, we will number one see the data related to the recent oil spills, some very prominent oil spills both in India as well as at the global level. Now, before I move further, I'll tell you one of the most, let's say, biggest environmental oil spill disaster of the recent times. Okay, the year was 2010, and here I am referring to the deep water horizon incident. Now, deep water horizon incident actually happened in the Gulf of Mexico. So the oil exploration rigging activity was done by the British Petroleum here. And this case study is very important. Okay. So what happened in this case, there was a fire which broke out, and for 87 days, almost 4.9 million barrels of oil was released in the ecosystem. Can you imagine the kind of impact? Now, if such a huge quantity of oil is released, of course, it will have environmental impact, which of course we will discuss. It also had a legal impact because this company, which was actually doing this particular project, had to face both legal as well as regulatory challenges. And third, because of this incident, a huge discussion in the global forum happened about sustainable energy sources and sustainable shipping processes. So this deep water horizon incident, and again I will refer to this incident again, happens to be one of the most devastating oil spills of all times, releasing 4.9 million barrels of oil into the ocean ecosystem, and this happened for almost 87 days in stretch. Okay, I will also give you a lot of recent incidences both at the global level, also at the India level, to tell you the magnitude of the problem which we are facing. Okay, then we also shall understand the causes which are making the oil spills, that why is it we are not able to control it. So we will understand both the natural as well as the man-made, that is the anthropogenic causes which cause the oil spills. Fine. Now, after causes, we'll also understand the impact. Now, with this, we will also examine the unique geography of India, because we have to understand the impact on India and also at the global level, right? So we will understand the impact. Then we will also see, because if the oil pollution is happening, number one, we know what is the impact, but then how are we responding to it? Okay, so what are the measures which are in place, both again at the India level and at the global level? Do we have a contingency plan? If yes, there is a contingency plan, what are the steps? Fine. And even if the steps or the measures are there, are they sufficient? So again, we will see the way forward, that how are we supposed to move ahead in this regard. And lastly, I'll also tell you a lot of current technological developments in this whole field, including microorganisms, including the use of nanotechnology, different fabrics being created to ultimately tackle this whole menace of oil pollution. Because as we are moving forward, and again, which the data is also showing, that in some cases we have been able to reduce the frequency of oil spills, but the severity of oil spills is still intact. Which means even if you have lesser oil spills, but in some spills, the magnitude of the oil released is so huge that the impact on the ecosystem is extremely disruptive. So this is how we're going to understand this whole topic in very good detail. So one by one, let me start here. Okay. In global, I will again tell you the most recent incidences, but you should note down the most prominent was the deep water exploration which happened. Okay. The deep water, pardon me, this is deep water horizon. Okay, I'll again write it here so that you do not forget it. Deep water horizon incident. ये सबसे ज्यादा एक चैलेंजिंग इंसिडेंट था ऑफ 2010. ओके. एंड वी ऑल्सो एक्सप्लोर इंडियाज वल्नरेबिलिटी. अब इंडिया की जो वल्नरेबिलिटी की हम बात करते हैं, व्हेन वी टॉक अबाउट दिस, इंडिया हैज 7500 किलोमीटर्स ऑफ कोस्ट लाइन. नाउ दिस कोस्ट लाइन विल गिव यू टू थिंग्स. वन, यू विल हैव अ लॉट ऑफ, आपके पास बहुत टूरिज्म पोटेंशियल बनेगा, a lot of tourism potential. Second, you also get a lot of fish production. Fish production भी improve होगा as a consequence. Now imagine both of these things being impacted by spill of oil. Okay, so again your tourism, the money from the tourism will decline. Livelihoods can also decline. So this is also a problem. Again, one more issue which we face, which is again India's vulnerability here. India has a very high, almost 80% import we are doing of oil, which again means, again, if the oil spills, number one, we have to import even more. Second, you also lose money. हम यहाँ भी money lose कर रहे हैं क्योंकि हमारी import dependency बहुत ज़्यादा high है oils पे. So this is also something we have to understand. So now let us see. First of all, कुछ हम examples India में देखते हैं जो बहुत prominent oil leaks हुए हैं. So ONGC leak, this happened this year only, 2023 में ONGC leak had happened. There was a Chennai oil spill in 2017. और again ये कुछ important facts आप starting में अगर mention करेंगे अपने answer में, if you write this down in the starting of your answers, this will give a very good contextual introduction. Okay, that of course you can define what is an oil spill. Oil spill ultimately क्या है? That it is the spillage of oil, okay, in the proper aquatic ecosystem. And there have been a lot of incidences जैसे Sundarbans 2014, okay, और Mumbai coast हो गया 2010. So these are the four prominent examples. And ultimately again the crude oil or the petroleum which pollutes the marine aquatic ecosystem, that is oil pollution. Okay, and these are some of the prominent leaks or which have happened. और इन सारी जगहों पे हमने जो ramifications का impact देखे, what did we see? कि ultimately there was a lot of destruction of aquatic ecosystems, which I will explain in more detail in the impacts. Okay, but again these are one of the most prominent leaks that have happened of late. Okay, moving on, global occurrences देखते हैं. The Gulf of Mexico, again मैंने पहले आपको बताया, deep water horizon also happened in Gulf of Mexico in the year 2010. और ये region में पहली बात तो बहुत exploration होता है, and because of a lot of frequent exploration there is a high chances of oil getting spilled here. Okay, then there is a Keystone pipeline oil spill there also in 2022. Oil spill happened. Then Mauritius also saw an oil spill in the year 2020, and also in Venezuela. So of late if you see, there have been a lot of oil spills which are happening. Okay, up from here what should be your takeaway has been summarized here. So if I move to this particular slide here, just a second, that incidences of oil spills किस तरह से चल रहे हैं. So here again I will again come back here and I'll give you two main facts. Okay, that around 1.8 large oil spills are happening every year in the last decade. Almost 1.8 large oil spills are happening. Then second question would be, how much oil is usually getting spilled? Okay, so for the year 2022 it is around 15,000 metric tons. 15,000 metric tons of oil is on an average spilled in 1 year. Okay, 15,000 metric tons approx. And again imagine 2010 की oil spill में 4.9 million barrels of oil was released. That was such a big event. तो ये दो main cases हैं. And again, almost every year we are seeing a lot of leaks and examples. So this is a point of concern. Now, you would be wondering that despite a lot of technology, despite a lot of interventions, regulations, why is this happening? ऐसा क्यों हो रहा है? Okay? तो उसको समझने के लिए let us understand the causes. And again, in most of the things for disasters, environment in general, you will find you will have both natural causes as well as man-made causes. So first of all, we'll see what are the natural causes here. Okay? So the biggest natural cause, okay, happens to be natural seepage from the seabed. क्या इसका मतलब है? What does it mean? That in the seabed you can have some rock, some fissures, ठीक है? There can be some breaking etc. in some rock, जिस rock में already crude या oil deposit है. From that, slowly and steadily, you will have a natural seepage of oil. So this is the most primary natural cause of oil spill. सबसे बड़ा cause यही है that there is a natural seepage from seabed. One. Second, there can be a natural disaster. So मान लेते हैं कोई भी, if there is an underwater, again under the sea, there are oil deposits. Okay. Now there is a underwater earthquake. There can be an underwater tsunami. What will happen because of this? There will be constant rupture. So जो भी deposits हैं, they will be broken off finally, and this will lead to release of oil. Again a problem. So natural disaster is also a consequence. Third, erosion activities. Okay. For example, this is my shore. This is the sea part of it. ठीक है? A lot of waves, बहुत waves बार बार shore पे impact, they will be hitting the shores. This leads to coastal erosion. Okay. So coastal erosion can also lead to, now if the coast, again the coast has a lot of velocity, a lot of force with it, it is going to hit the areas with deposits. Just deposits may you have oil etc. If it is going to hit those deposits, what will happen? Again the oil will get spilled. Okay. So these are the natural reasons because of which you have oil spills or oil pollution. Now we will see the anthropogenic or the man-made causes. Okay. अब यहाँ पे we will have a longer list because man-made inventions or interventions have increased. Okay. So number one, it purely can be an accident. Okay. Again, in manufacturing process, बहुत ही manufacturing process में there can be just, for example, the ship can have a hazard. या ship या कोई भी oil है और कोई भी tanker है, it might just explode. Okay. So accidental things, yes, they can happen. Now, ये जो point है, this has become problematic. Offshore drilling. Okay. So पहली बात तो onshore drilling होगी and there is offshore drilling. Onshore drilling में भी there are problems and chances of oil spills. Similarly, offshore drilling and extraction can also be a problem. In fact, the case which I had spoken about, the deep water horizon case of 2010 is a classic example of offshore drilling. That in that if there is an explosion and finally a lot of oil is released, this is also a man-made cause. तो ऑफशोर ड्रिलिंग या एक्सट्रैक्शन से भी ऑयल स्पिल हो सकती है. देन शिप रिलेटेड एक्टिविटीज, इसीलिए a lot of regulation is needed in the shipping. We have to ensure sustainable processes. Okay. So shipping related activities, again, if there is a rupture, if there is a fault etc., this can also lead to a problem. Then onshore, so these 2 points you should remember. If there is a onshore facilities, if this is leading to emissions, this can also be offshore. So I will have 2 points here to write. Okay. And then both transportation, in transportation I will have the movements of ships, other ferries etc., which again maybe if there's a collision, if there is a malfunction of any of the equipments, or in general there are a lot of carbon dioxide emissions here which again consumes let's say oil, क्योंकि movement के लिए भी तो I will be requiring oil. So ultimately it's a vicious cycle that oil, because I'm using oil to run a machine etc., because of that there can be a spill etc., right? And similarly ships etc. also require a lot of these energy sources which will also release emissions. तो दोनों तरह से you are ultimately leading to increase of emissions. And finally, a lot of untreated sewage है, ठीक है? If there is an untreated sewage, right? And if this is not sufficiently treated, which can also lead to problems, right? So this is a list of the possible causes, okay, of the oil spills. Again, please make sure जब भी आप mains में आंसर लिखेंगे, try to segregate it into natural as well as anthropogenic. Okay, moving forward, causes तो हमने समझ लिए. Let us understand the impact of oil pollution. And before I give you the certain impacts, I'll tell you that oil and the hydrocarbon related, let's say, components, okay, these components have PAH, okay, which you can also write down if you want. So they basically be having polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons, ठीक है? Oil या उसके compounds, they will have polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons which are toxic in nature. Fine. तो oil के जो component में if there is a toxic substance, what will this lead to? This will lead to death of aquatic ecosystems in the long term. Fine. Second, this can also lead to bioaccumulation, and this can also lead to biomagnification, right? So if what is accumulation? If the pollutant is going to get increased over a period of time across one trophic level, ठीक है? So let's say PAH compounds are very less initially, but over a period of time they will accumulate across one trophic level, that is known as bioaccumulation. But if they are magnifying across trophic levels, their concentration increases, that is known as biomagnification. So it's a toxic compound. This can happen, right? Second very obvious thing is that, and of course one more thing, if bioaccumulation and biomagnification agar ye hoega, to our food chains, the food web will also be impacted, right? So the entire ecosystem is having a problem. Fun. Second thing that you need to know here is, again, if there is an oil spill, so this is water layer, the layer of water, and on top of that, us layer ke upar there is a layer of water. This is sun. So the sun will not be able to percolate. So again, the photosynthesis is getting impacted. And after a certain point of time, oxygen will also get reduced. So slowly and steadily, the lake will have depleted levels of oxygen, okay, which ultimately will result into a dead zone. What is a dead zone? A dead zone is a zone in which ultimately the levels of dissolved oxygen will reduce. Fine. अब इसी चीज को हम देखते हैं in two levels, okay. So generally we only think of the the environmental impact of oil spills, but I will also make sure that you understand the socio-economic impact of oil spills, okay. So number one, of course, loss of livelihood. Think of a fisherman who are dependent on the fish produce. अब अगर oil spill हो गई है, they will not be able to catch the fish will die. So overall there is a loss of livelihood. Fine. Then there are power plants which are dependent on extra or using the water resources. Now because अब oil अगर already polluted है, because and the water is polluted, so they will also be not be able to source enough water for their own needs. Again a problem. Marine जो products हैं वो भी contaminated हो जाएंगे. So again, they cannot be sold off to markets very well, and overall this will also impact their marketability, price, consumption. And very important, tourism is also impacted. Let's say you want to visit a lake or a water body, and again, what will you do? You might use a boat, you might use things. If imagine there's a big oil spill, tourism will also be impacted. So generally this will also have socio-economic impacts. Fine. ये भी ध्यान रखेंगे. And again, when I'm saying this, also keep in mind India's big coastline. Okay. So this is one. Now let us come to environmental impacts. और एक और चीज है, in your mains understanding, mains answer, try to use specific keywords of, let's say, disaster management or environment. ठीक है? So I'll tell you a lot of points here. That is why I started with how will the food chain get disrupted. ठीक, right from the phytoplanktons who might also die after some point of time to let's say zooplankton या जो बाकी सारे organisms हैं, my food chain, जो food chain है वो disrupt हो जाएगी, number one point. Second is formation of dead zones. Why? Decrease in dissolved oxygen. Then damage to biodiversity hotspots. एक और चीज है, ocean ecosystems, marine ecosystems have a lot of unique biodiversity. In the event of disruption of food chains and formation of dead zones, these biodiversity hotspots will get damaged. Bilkul. Then generally speaking, again, there will be a lot of water pollution because of this, right? These are contaminants. This will lead to water pollution. Remember, we had spoken about the polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons, which are toxic in nature, right? The soil, because water, oceans and the soil ecosystems live in harmony, so soil will also get contaminated here. Okay, again, imagine if there is an ocean, if there's a wave, and then there's a beach, a lot of that ocean water will also come to the beach, so ultimately leading to soil contamination. It releases harmful substances which we have already seen, polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons, right? Ab, some time back, especially in the Juhu beach and in the beaches of Mumbai, हमने tar balls देखे. Tar balls are sludgy, okay, the black tar based or tar filled compounds, again, which is released or which gets formed due to oil pollution or oil spills, right? So tar balls got created, वो भी problem हुई. अब marine animals हैं या fishes हैं, all the important organisms of the aquatic ecosystems will be impacted, right? So be it marine, be it fishes. So one is fishes are getting destroyed, but your fishery collection is also getting destroyed. Think about aquaculture, right? Think about shrimp farming. ये भी नहीं हो पाएगा अच्छे से, aquaculture, shrimp farming, etc. Again a problem. Then there is a damage to the coral reefs. Now coral reefs again have or support a lot of biodiversity. Think about the coral polyp or the zooxanthellae and the surrounding ecosystems. There will be a lot of damage because of all the problems outlined here. Okay, so this is also a problem, and again we have seen the loss of mangroves. And jitne bhi, for example, we saw Sundarbans spill leak. So Sundarbans is having the world's largest concentration of mangroves, so you will lose the mangroves. Similarly, when there was in Chennai the oil spill or oil leak, we saw the damage to the fishes, marine reefs, marine animals, to the coral reefs, right? So jitne bhi humne examples dekhe, in many of that we see a lot of problems at the socio-economic level and at the environmental level. Okay, so this is something again we have to keep in mind. Okay, now because these, let's say, problems are existing, so you might be wondering hum karte kya hain. Okay, so yes, we have certain plans and mechanisms in place. Okay, and the first being the National Oil Spill Contingency Plan of 1996. Okay, so ये, by the way, एक और चीज है, before I'll tell you, we do not have a comprehensive law or a disaster management plan specific to this. Okay, but अभी हमारे लिए एक contingency disaster plan है, which again is not very detailed because again it's an old plan and newer kind of, let's say, problems are happening. So one of the things I'll tell you at the end as a way forward is to again get this updated and have a proper law. But still, yes, we have a national oil spill disaster contingency plan which talks about three main things. Okay, it talks about containment, it talks about recovery, okay, and it also talks about finally cleanup. These are the three major things it talks about, right? Right, so this is one thing, and again it again outlines state governments, different ministries, and the work to be done in order to ultimately carry out containment, recovery, and cleanup activities. Okay. Second, you also have the Indian Coast Guard guidelines, and you also have CRZ, coastal regulatory zones, which also talks about the management of oil pollution or oil spills. ठीक है? तो अब when I'm talking of the Indian Coast Guard guidelines, there are few points which you can also write down. Okay? So सबसे पहले तो it talks about the Indian Coast Guard guidelines कि जितने भी howsoever you have basically it has directed all ports to prepare a local mitigation plan. Right? All the ports will have to create a local mitigation plan. Second, it also talks about that if there is a tanker greater than or let's say above 25 years of age. So again, the old tankers will not be allowed to enter into the port because many times we have seen that it is the old tankers which have caused the problem. ठीक है? तो हम old tankers को which are let's say older in size, we will not be entering, let's say allowing entering. Okay? And third important point which is also needed, regular inspection and maintenance. Regular inspection and maintenance to be carried out of tankers and general the port facilities. So regular inspection and maintenance, tankers greater than 25 years of age would not be allowed. And finally, that all the ports, they have to create their own local mitigation plan. Okay. So you have a disaster contingency plan, you have the Indian Coast Guard guidelines, and you also have CRZ rules, right? And then at the international level, there are also having conventions. There are also different forums, jisme the different stakeholders come together to solve this one big global problem. Okay. So one, you have the Bunker Convention here, the International Convention on Civil Liability for bunker oil pollution damage, number one. You have the Marpol Convention. अब Marpol Convention आप prelims में भी पढ़ते हो. The Marpol Convention basically talks about prevention of pollution from shipping. Right? This is what the Marpol Convention tells you. Then there is also London Convention. This also sometimes we read about. The London, basically this convention talks about if, at least in the marine water bodies, if there is a dumping activity of dumping of waste going on, okay? So dumping of waste and other matter is spoken about in the London Convention. Then you have global initiatives and then different, also a global maritime forum. So internationally also the whole idea is to ensure how can we discuss this issue, okay? And how can we solve it? So for example, when I'm talking of global initiative program, this is again led by International Maritime Organization. Okay, again we had seen a question in mains on IMO, and we had also seen a question on oil pollution. So again, IR के perspective में भी IMO becomes important, right? And generally oil pollution is important topic both when we talk of, let's say, logistics, movement, cargo movement, and also environmental and disaster management के angle से भी important है. And then there is a global maritime forum in which the, let's say, the global stakeholders will come together and they will try to solve this problem, right? तो ये तो हमारे international measures हो गए. आगे बढ़ते हैं. Then what should be the way forward in this case, right? I told you that yes, we do have certain plans in place, but do we have the legislative exact measures of what is to be done? No. So number one point here is to be to create or have a comprehensive legislation which is updated with the most recent kind of impacts, right? We have the data, so that we need to create a legislation to have proper roles, penalties, because otherwise these leaks etc will continue to happen without much action on the ground. So number one, we have to have strong legislative measures. Okay, this is one. Second, the regulations and oversight is also important. Now, I told you the first case in which we spoke about British Petroleum. Imagine the same case happening in India, which may be causing a lot of, let's say, problems to Sundarbans, Chennai, other areas. We have to have proper regulations, and again a proper regulatory oversight has to be there. so that even if there is a spill, contingency plans have to be executed. Who is going to be liable? What is going to be the penalty? How is the remediation or the improvement work going to be? All these things have to be outlined. Okay. Again, for developing countries के लिए सबसे बड़ी दो दिक्कतें हैं. The biggest two problems is money, okay, and one is technology. So we have to invest in technology. In fact, I'll tell you a case studies of, let's say, IIT Guwahati and other institutes who have spent money to solve this problem of oil pollution. Okay, so there is a need to invest money here, R&D, the research and development. And lastly, there is a need for generating awareness. Okay, so that at least at the local level, at the level of industries, and even at the global level, through the shipping routes, etc., we are number one, not polluting. We have better mechanisms. So these are few things to be done. How will this help us? तो पहली बात तो, in sustainable development goals, there is SDG number 14, which talks about life below land, of course, which talks about water. So we want to achieve SDG 14, and we want to have sustainable aquaculture. We want to have sustainable shipping routes. ठीक? तो I need to ensure, देखो पहली बात तो, we want that global maritime trade improves. For that, we have to ensure that if there is an oil pollution, we should be able to treat it with the best of technology, with awareness, with proper mechanisms. And moving forward, we want to reduce it as much as possible. And this will overall help us in having better livelihoods, better socio-economic development, better environmental impact, or lesser, let's say, negative impact on environment. So there is a comprehensive need to invest in solutions related to managing or tackling the oil spills. And again, in this regard, I'll tell you a couple of recent developments. कुछ recent developments हुए हैं अभी. ठीक है, तो for example, if I talk of an aerogel, now this was developed by IIT Roorkee. What this gel does, ठीक है, so again, for example, if this is water surface, again there is a coating of oil, so there will be an oil suction pump, तो वो oil को वहां से हटा देगा. This aerogel will be useful in this regard. Oil zapper, okay. Up oil zapper, you have also oilivorous S. This is an example of bioremediation. इसका मतलब क्या होगा? That when you use a biological organism, okay, again which can be a bacteria, etc., this will slowly and steadily eat up the pollutants. ठीक है? These are oil loving in nature. So again वो slowly steadily oil को consume कर लेंगे and they will remove the entire sludge of oil. तो in this case oil zapper can be used. Okay. दूसरा अगर हम बात करते हैं nano wire mesh, I told you the use of technology and again having very small, let's say nano scale meshes can also help me in purifying the water, getting rid of the excess oil which is spilled. And there can also be a silica coated cotton fabric. Okay, अब इस silica coated cotton fabric का, let's say, the biggest use or is that it is developed using rice husk, which is again, let's say, a kind of a waste material during the process. So agar if we are also able to sustainably use the waste generated in treating a global environmental problem like oil pollution, it will definitely be better, right? So these are the kind of current developments which are there to tackle oil pollution. Okay, so again, if I have to finally summarize this topic, so we started with what is oil pollution, what is the data associated with it. Okay, then we saw the causes, and again remember, in the causes we've seen both natural as well as anthropogenic. Then we saw impacts, socio-economic impact as well as the environmental impact, and then the measures which have been taken both at the level of India and at the global level. We also saw what can be done in the way forward and the recent developments that are there in this field. Again, remember, to find a sustainable solution to the problem requires to have sustainable development, requires us to think of alternatives to oil ultimately. That is why energy component is very important. In fact, SDG number 7 talks about clean and affordable energy. So if we ultimately move beyond oil, which can take a lot of years, but still, this is something we have to aspire to at later time. So the case of oil pollution tells us, or there is a complex interplay of number one, legal measures, environmental, let's say, components, and energy components, right? So with this, we will end this main discussion of oil pollution. I'll meet you shortly with the next topic. Thank you.